Hey everybody, I just want to share a few comments about Saturn in Aries, and I'll probably bring in a little bit of Neptune as well. I say that because I intend to come back and possibly do another session um, on the conjunction between the two. And perhaps that's because the true conjunction doesn't occur really until February next year, which I'm sure most of you are aware of that. The thing is, though, that they are very close together all this year and have been anyway in Pisces. And the fact is, both of them are still going to go back into Pisces. So the true conjunction doesn't really start until February 2026. And the way I work with the language of the stars is I don't only bring forth theory. Theory is one thing, understanding theory through uh, study and through the observation of correlation, connection. But it's also, astrology is very much about intuition as well. So our own intuition can really guide us through the different interpretation, the different possible potential manifestations and things like that. And everyone's going to have their own intuition, right? Their own guidance with it. And I have my own, just like everyone does. So the point is that I'm really just sort of still processing what the true meaning of this is going to be. Now, I know a lot of astrologers have already started talking about it because it is one of those events that is definitely um, bigger than even bigger than what our own words can really explain. The first thing is that whilst there are Saturn Neptune conjunctions every 36 years in a particular sign, the conjunction at 0 degrees Aries, first of all, is so significant because it's 0 degrees, right? It's the beginning of the entire zodiac. It's the beginning of everything, the beginning and the end of everything. Now, we are talking about tropical zodiac at the moment for today, okay? Whilst I do work with both Babylonian or sidereal and tropical, I don't think I'll ever come to a point where I don't work with tropical and just completely shift into the Babylonian. Never say never is something that I've said probably my entire life. But the way I feel at the moment, I can't see that I would actually choose one or the other. I think both are extremely important, both are extremely valid, and it is important to understand both if one can. So, having said that, today's focus will be primarily around Saturn in Aries. And again, this was inspired through some particular personal events that have manifested for me just recently, which got me thinking that this is a great way to guide people and to share some things to think about relative to house systems as well, um, which is going to be very important, a very important point. And one of the reasons for that, or the primary reason for that actually, is because, believe it or not, most people work with the wrong time of birth. Often that's a hard thing for people to accept because we have this sort of prejudice, which means prejudging something, uh, or attachment or conditioned belief, right? On various things. And especially when it comes to our time of birth, because there's this idea that, well, if the hospital wrote it down as, 12 noon, my time of birth was 12 noon. And I've spoken about this for years. just because the hospital wrote your time of birth down at 12 noon, it does not mean you were born at exactly 12 noon. There's a video on my channel. I can't remember the name of it, but if you just search in my channel, time of birth rectification, you'll come across a really good video that I did a few years ago, which really explains what I'm talking about right now in great depth and detail with a very specific example to demonstrate, okay, just how important this time of birth factor is. Okay, leaving that aside for a moment, one thing that I'll start with this Saturn Neptune energy in Aries for today. Actually, before I go there, that's right. I just wanted to also say that even though the conjunctions between Saturn and Neptune occur every 36 years in different signs, the 0 degrees of Aries, they have not met at 0 degrees Aries. I'm not sure of the exact date. I've tried looking into it myself. It's really complicated. It's going to take a bit of work, and I've sort of worked at it a little bit. But see, we have to get both Neptune and Saturn at 0, 0, 0, 0. It's not a pure conjunction if Saturn is at 0 degrees and a couple of minutes, and then Neptune's, just behind it and ready to step into 0 degrees of Aries, and say it does the next day, for example, and Saturn the next day might be 0 degrees and 10 minutes. And you might think, because you'll see, if you're not aware of minutes and seconds and things like that, you'll see Saturn and Neptune at 0, 0, and you'll think, oh, there it is. But that's not the case. We need to get them both at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, right? 0 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. And from what I can see thus far, it looks like this happened thousands of years ago, thousands of years ago. So that within itself really shows us the uniqueness of the juncture that we are in at this point in our life and this point in history from a collective perspective. And these two planetary bodies, or these two divinities, or these two archetypes, you can look at it, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, physically, on every single level would count. These two are the absolute antithesis of one another, Saturn and Neptune. The meaning of Saturn, the meaning of Neptune, they are the two most opposing forces. Thus, they have nothing in common. And, when two things don't have anything in common, well, that sets the tone, doesn't it, for the differences and the likely challenges as well. And, taking place at 0, 0, 0, 0, which hasn't happened for thousands and thousands of years, is beyond actually what we can really fathom and conceive and truly understand at the moment. And I still think no matter what we say, all of us, all the astrologers in the world, and there's going to be some, great astrologers that have great things to say, no doubt, right? Or that already have perhaps, and so forth. But I just get this really deep sense, intuitive sense that no matter what anybody says, including myself, there's so much of this that will really not be clearly seen or understood for some time yet. We all have, theory behind us. We might have some intuitive sense and so on and so forth. And that informs the perspective that we might have on it and the things that we share. But I still feel that there is a big part of this picture that cannot be seen at the moment. And I guess if those words true, which I think they are, that will be revealed as time goes on. So where I want to start is here. And I was talking to someone this morning, actually, the guy that I first started studying astrology with many, many years ago now, who's, one of my best friends in life. And we speak, frequently. And he made a statement this morning, and it's not a new comment. It's something that he and I have discussed over the years through different contexts and so on and so forth. But he reminded me of it this morning, and I thought that is such a poignant and powerful statement for what the Saturn Aries conjunction at 0 degrees Aries will really be all about. And this is like the crux of it, right? This is like the essence, but how each one will experience that and how that will unfold will obviously be very unique for every single one of us, whilst at the same time, there will be a collective field that we are all tapped into one way or another, again, based on our perspective. And here's what he said. He said, the primary reality is actually within us. So your primary reality is within you. That's the primary reality. Everything else, meaning the world, everything you see, everyone you hear, everyone you're in connection with, everyone you talk to, everything outside of yourself is a secondary reality which derives from your internal reality, okay, that you project out there. So that's a very, very, very esoteric, philosophical, deep understanding of life. And the Saturn-Neptune conjunction will be projected through our own primary reality. What is our primary reality? Well, it's different for all of us. And it depends on, the conditioned layers we have and our unconscious field, right? What's lying there, and all the layers within that we are aware of or not aware of, that we unconsciously project. Remember that, Psychology 101, and Carl Jung spoke about this extensively in all his work because he understood it so well. The unconscious projection aspect of our life experience is the most powerful driving force within us. Most of what we do in this life derives from the motivation behind what we do derives from this unconscious content within us that we mostly unconsciously project. It's a very complex thing when you look at all angles of it, but it's also very simple in the sense where what we see is part of our own projection. It doesn't matter what it is. It's part of our own projection. And the awakening that, people make reference to, I had an awakening in 2011, or, I had Kundalini awakening in, whatever, or I had, the most intense experience of the dark night of the soul, and I woke up out of that and I just suddenly, could see things. Or I had an ayahuasca trip and I saw, what, so on and so forth, right? There's so many pathways into what people identify as some type of awakening. And I don't think that there is just one awakening, that is the everything. I think the journey of awakening, if we are to stick with that word, I think it's exactly that. It's a journey. So it unfolds, gradually. We might have, certain times that we identify as real peak kind of times of really seeing. And then we might, go back into a different mode again. And then, a few years later, we might have another peak of another realization, right? So it's not like it just happens one time in our life only and that's it. Some people might think that, might believe that, might identify that to be the case, but there's another life that you're going to step into next time. So these things are very, very complex. But anyway, if we can give some thought to the idea, the notion that your primary reality and everything you experience comes from within yourself. Well, the most beautiful thing about that statement, not understanding it only intellectually, because understanding something intellectually is not the same as understanding it from a deep soul core level and embodying it in such a way where you live through that, right? It's one thing, intellect is one thing, um, insight and inner knowing that doesn't come from logic or reason or intellect is another thing altogether. So if we understand that we come from we have this reality within us that we do project, and what we project is everything we see out there, the whole world, everything. That's a secondary factor. And this is very Aries, if you think about it. It's pure Aries, actually. It therefore enables us to realize our own personal power and our own creation of our experiences. So to understand this is a self-empowering revelation or insight. And the Neptune Saturn within the context of this comment, this statement that the primary reality is within, is very much reflected through the combination of Saturn and Neptune because of what those two archetypes represent. Neptune speaks to that aspect of ourself that is infinite, that is divine, that is, uh, connected to everything, the oneness of everything, which again, these are just words, right? So that experience cannot be captured in words. It cannot be defined in words. It's something that we need to uh, sense, and feel from a place very deep within. So Neptune is that spirit, divine source, infinite energy that runs through everything and every one of us, everything and every one of us, period. You can't box that in and contain it to be one particular thing. It's fluid. Whereas Saturn is the complete opposite. Saturn is boxed in. Saturn rules corners, lines, boundaries, structure, form, matter. So they are completely opposite, aren't they? Yet they are meeting together at 0000. And another way to understand that there is so much of this that we are yet to truly understand and discover. Every month we have a new moon. I'll just use a very simple example. Every month we have a new moon. And okay, we look at the sign that it's in, we look at the aspects that it has, and yada, yada, yada. And we try to, formulate some type of forecast around that. First thing is looking at the sign, of course, and, where it falls in your birth chart and so on and so forth. Put all that aside for a moment. What is the new moon? The new moon is the sun and moon in a conjunction. Now, if you look at the new moon in the sky, you will not see it. It's black. So, if you've got a pot plant and you plant a seed in there, you can't see what's going to flower. You'll know because in most cases you've chosen the seed that you're going to put in that pot plant, right? So if you got, seeds for roses, you're expecting roses are going to bloom. But you cannot see it when you first plant it. That's the point. And so this is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. This is the most purest energy that is giving birth to a brand new era collectively and for us individually as well. Saturn Neptune conjunctions can really bring about what I like to describe as free floating anxiety. It's really not an easy conjunction at all. I mean, this is a really, one of the most phenomenal astronomical phenomena that we are actually here to witness. The last time it happened was thousands and thousands of years ago. So we're quite privileged in that way, I think. And on the other hand, it is purposeful. We are all here. We chose to be here during this time. We are all collectively writing the story, a new story for the generations to come. So our part in this picture, in this story, is so meaningful, so powerful, and so important. And we've been given, if you like, a clean slate, as it were. It's 0 Aries. It's the epitome of the purest form of energy. There's nothing there yet. It's just pure, like a blank, canvas. Now, as I said, I will come back to say more on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but let me now just shift the focus back onto just Saturn in Aries. And this is where I want to bring in the whole matter of house systems. Perhaps I'll share my screen and yeah, I just want to show you here, for example. Now, see this chart here. This is 1742 BC. Now, that was a long time ago. But even then, like when I animate this chart, I'll do it actually just to show you. This is part of what I was exploring relative to the Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. It's a tedious process, but anyway. So let's just, okay. You can see there that we've got Saturn and Neptune at 0000, Aries, in the year of 1742 BC. But look at the minutes. Neptune is 0 degrees 3 minutes. Saturn is 0 degrees 39 minutes. So Saturn, being a faster moving body out of the two, is already significantly ahead of Neptune. So they didn't meet at 0000. Now, if you didn't pay attention to the minutes, and if we go into another section, we can find the seconds as well. Because in the chart, it shows you the degrees and it shows you the minutes. You don't see the seconds, but there are seconds there as well. In any case, the point is that although this conjunction occurred at 0 Aries, it did not occur at the pure degree because Saturn has already moved past Neptune. This is just, I just wanted to show you this so that you can visualize what I was saying at the very beginning. So the true conjunction at 0000 last occurred thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. It's insane. It's inconceivable. And here we are, 2025. There's Saturn at 0:21 minutes, and there's Neptune at 1 degree and 49 minutes. And one might argue, well, they're so close. How can they not be conjunct? Yes, they are conjunct. But the true birth of this conjunction does not occur until February of 2026. And furthermore, both Saturn and Neptune are going to go back into Pisces one more time this year. So the story of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Pisces is not over. The story of Neptune in Pisces is not over. The story of Saturn in Pisces is still not over. Now, going back to what I was saying a moment ago about Saturn in Aries and people not having necessarily the right time of birth and so forth. If you do have an exact time of birth, then I would look at your quadrant house system. That is the chart that you will use based on some type of house system. That might be Placidus, that might be Koch, or it might be something else. There's several house systems. Placidus is one of the most popular ones, if you like. There are many house systems. I personally use the Koch house system when I'm looking at a birth chart that has an absolute right time. However, even though I have, for example, my time of birth is 100% correct, it was rectified by my teacher about 30 years ago. So that's given me enough time to observe and correlate, even just through transits, for example, what's happened in my life over the last 30 years, to test and see, okay, that time of birth, which my time of birth went back around 40 minutes back. So it went into the next day. Most people will resist that if they're told that. They will resist. No, I was born on the 5th, not on the 4th. There's no way you can tell me I was born on the 4th. Well, there is a way, and it does happen. So, side note, if you want your time rectified, reach out. That's something that we can do. So anyway, look, whatever quadrant chart house system you're working with, whatever time of birth you're working with, that's up to you, right? The point I'm making is that if your time is a bit iffy, if there's a possibility it's a bit iffy, and even if it's not, even if it's accurate, I would still say look at the whole sign house systems chart for yourself as well. Because what that's going to do is it's going to place 0 degrees on every house cusp, right? 0 degrees on every house cusp. So you're going to get this clean transition and shift. So wherever you have 0 degrees Aries in your birth chart, that could be your ascendant, it could be your second house, it could be any one of these houses. Well, it will be one of these houses. If you look at your whole sign house chart where 0 gets placed on every cusp, then you can look at the timing of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 Aries as beginning February next year. But you can also look at the timing of just Saturn going into Aries, which happened, I think it was the 25th of May. It went into 0 Aries. So that Saturn at 0 Aries went into a particular house for you, right? Depending on where you have 0 Aries. So that's starting something already. Even though it may very well be, because if you're working with a any other house system where you have degrees like this, for example, on the cusp, then you might have had Saturn, which has been in Pisces for the last 2.5 years. You might have Aries and Pisces contained, part of Aries and part of Pisces in just the one house. So in other words, you might have had Saturn already in your Aries house for the last 6 months or the last year. It just depends what degrees you've got on the cusp, or the cusps of the actual chart. So look, let me put it like this. So Saturn entered an area of my chart where that house shares Aries and Pisces. And so Saturn has been in my part of my, because I've got 2 houses with Aries in there. So it's been in one house for quite some time. And yes, it did bring up to focal point a lot of themes from a Saturn perspective. So difficult stuff from a Saturn perspective around the themes of that house. But when Saturn got to 0 Aries on the 25th of May, there was something huge that was triggered and activated relative to the themes of that house that hadn't quite shown up yet, even though Saturn was already in that house. Do you get what I'm saying? So Saturn, let me just see if I can do it with this chart. I have to get the degrees in a particular way to demonstrate. Let me just play around with this. Just give me a second. No, go back the other way. That's going to take way too much fiddling around. Never mind. If it's not clear, just put it under the comments and I'll see if I can clarify it verbally. But it's very simple. If you are using a quadrant house system, which is the Koch, the periphery, the Placidus, equal house system, there's several, right? Most of you would be aware with the at the very least, the Placidus house system. That's going to give you a particular degree on the ascendant based on your time of birth, and subsequently particular degrees on every house cusp, which are almost certainly not going to be zero. In fact, no, they won't be zero on every house cusp. You might have a 0-degree ascendant, but that doesn't mean you're going to have 0 degrees on every other house cusp. So when you convert your chart to whole sign houses, it places 0 degrees on every house cusp. So when a planet moves over, a particular house, a planet in the sky is transiting at 0 degrees, it's ready to go in, cross over into a particular area of your chart, particular house. That timing is very important, is what I'm trying to say. Even though from your quadrant house system, that planet might have already been in there for a while, or maybe it's yet to come. There can be a couple of variations there. I'm suggesting pay attention to both because both work. Both whole sign house system transits work and both quadrant house system transits work. They just show up different timing of events to the themes corresponding to that area of life, that particular house. Each house corresponds to various themes in our life. So for those who have an iffy time, using whole sign houses for transits is very valuable when your time is questionable. Whole sign houses is a system that's existed for a couple of thousand years, It's super old, but it works brilliantly. So there's that. And then, of course, you also want to consider wherever you've got 0 of cardinals. So what are the cardinal signs? We've got Aries, Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn. 4 signs, right? Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn. They're the 4 cardinal signs. Cardinal signs, especially at 0 degrees, they're like the atomic bomb. They are so loaded with power, so loaded. And as world degrees, when things happen at 0 degrees of cardinals, there are big turning points in the world that can be applied to our own chart as well, because 0 of cardinals is going to be somewhere in your chart. Now, you might not have it on angles, but you might. That's another thing to consider. Also, you might have an Aries stellium, meaning you might have numerous planets in Aries, planets, points, and or asteroids. Don't overlook the asteroids. Now, I've got 2 planets in Aries, and they're very personal planets. So they're extremely important to pay attention to. My Sun and my Mercury are both in Aries, for instance. And they remain in Aries in the Babylonian zodiac too, by the way. So I'm an Aries both in sidereal and both in tropical. I'm true Aries through and through. Couldn't, that's just how it is. It's just a fact. For some of you who have planets in Aries, your planets might go back into Pisces once you look at your Babylonian sidereal chart. Anyway, that's another side note. But I was just going to say that I've only got 2 planets in Aries, but I've got the bottom part of my chart, the IC, 4th house, at Aries as well. And I've got a lot of planets in the lower zones of my chart, right? So I've got like a couple of stelliums there, and it's a mixture of a couple of signs, 3 signs. And so subsequently, I've got all these, I've got numerous midpoints throughout the whole 30 degrees of Aries. So this Saturn-Neptune conjunction for me, for example, I'm sharing this because this might be you as well. And if it's something you have not considered, it's absolutely necessary to consider so that you can see more detail, so that you can get more meaning and more understanding of how this Saturn-Neptune is going to unfold for you in your life. So I've got all these midpoints basically, right, in the 30 degrees zone of Aries. So when Saturn Neptune, as they kick off their journey in Aries, those two are going to be hitting off, a number of different midpoints in my 30-degree zone of Aries. So many different things. I'm kind of like, whoa, I'm trying to buckle in for this. This is just going to be such an extraordinary ride for me personally. I know, I already know. So the point to that part of this information is don't forget to pay attention to midpoints, because you might be thinking, oh, I've just got one planet in Aries. Okay, so it's going to hit that planet at, next year sometime. Okay, what is that planet? Let's think about what that planet means. What house is it in? Okay, fine. But you might have all these other midpoints hanging around there as well, because you might have Aries over here in the fourth, and then you might have all these other bodies floating in the third and the fifth, the adjacent houses and signs. And that it's going to pick up all these midpoint structures. And I've spoken on midpoints for years now, reminding people, to pay attention to midpoints. Like, let me just show you, in case you're not aware of what midpoints are. So we can just use this chart as an example. If you're using Solarfire, this is what you would do. If you're using other programs, I don't know, because I don't know what program you're using, etc. So I can only demonstrate with the program that I'm currently showing on the screen. So you go to reports, okay? It brings up that tab, which just disappeared. Let me just grab it again. Just need to move it. Okay, so it brings up this, and then in this window up here, you've got all these various headings of things you can look at. One thing you want to be looking at here is something called midpoint listing. Okay, so if you click that, then it brings up this window. Okay, and the first half starts with the planets, starting from the order of the moon. Okay, you got moon, then it goes to the sun, then it goes to Mercury, Venus, basically the order of the planets in the sky. Okay, and you can see it's got a dash and then a symbol next to it. All the symbols. It's showing you, in other words, in this particular chart, what we're looking at right here is all the midpoints between the Sun, Moon, Sun, Vulcan, Sun, Mercury, the order of the planets again. And it's just showing you the degrees that are on those midpoints. So, for example, this chart here, which is just a transit chart for today, where's the Sun? Sun's at 8 Gemini, Moon's at 20 Cancer. And what it's showing us is that the midpoint between the sun and the moon in this chart, this could be your birth chart, it could be somebody else's birth chart. Sun moon midpoint is a very important midpoint to look at, by the way, just FYI. It's showing us that the midpoint is actually 29 Gemini. So if you're not familiar with calculations and the degrees of the zodiac and so forth, and I said to you, tell me the midpoint of the sun and the moon, you'll be looking at it thinking, well, I don't know, or I'm not sure, or maybe it's 20 Gemini, or maybe it's 29 Cancer, or whatever it is you might be thinking. If you don't know how to work it out visually, which most people don't, and you've got Solarfire, use this little wonderful little tool here. Shows you the midpoint is 29 Gemini. Now, the second part to this is as you scroll down, then it gives you another way of looking at things. It starts with the beginning of the zodiac, Aries, 0 degrees, right? And it goes through all the entire zodiac, right? If I scroll down, you can see it goes through the entire zodiac. And how is this different? It's showing us, okay, in this chart, what is at 0 Aries at the moment? It's Saturn, isn't it? So it's showing us Saturn is at 0 Aries. Now, what it starts to do is it goes through the whole entire 30 degrees of Aries, showing us every single midpoint that exists in this chart in the 30 degrees Aries, every single midpoint that's there. So let's pick one random one. Let's pick a one that might point to. Well, then again, this is a transit chart. Mercury. Yeah, okay. Pretend this was your birth chart, right? And I want to find the closest midpoint to Saturn. So pretend this is a birth chart, not a transiting chart. I want to find what's going on with my Aries kind of zone of my chart. So what I can see is that there's a midpoint between Mercury and Pluto that corresponds to Saturn and Neptune, because the midpoint of Mercury and Pluto in this chart, so there's Mercury, there's Pluto. The midpoint is very close to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Now, one might ask about orbs here, and you do need to keep relatively tight orbs. Like you wouldn't give 10 degrees as an orb, for midpoints. That's really excessive. You want to keep them pretty small, like 1, 2, 3 degrees. Sometimes there are exceptions, though, and that is seen purely through the circumstances and the life of the native, the life of the soul in question. In any case, let's just pretend that there was good cause and good reason to say, okay, where are we? Where did I? There we go. Mercury, Pluto. Is there something closer? I want personal planets because that can give you a more personalized interpretation, That's why I think I went to Mercury, Pluto, because Mercury is a very personal planet. So if this was a person's birth chart, we would say Saturn and Neptune is very close to the midpoint of this person's Mercury, Pluto. Is that important? It might very well be. I'm just showing an example of how to identify what you were seeing on the screen. Okay. It's not the best example of what I really wanted to show relative to transiting Saturn hitting off Aries midpoints. It will be next year as Saturn and Neptune, move along. Well, once they form their conjunction, a couple of years later, and they've moved on. Anyway, hopefully you get the gist of what I'm saying. Pay attention to midpoints because that Saturn-Neptune conjunction could be hitting off Aries midpoints in your chart. I would look at the opposing sign as well. You could have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction opposite Libra placements in your chart, and you might have a number of Libra placements, and therefore that Saturn-Neptune is activating all these Libra midpoints in your chart. And I would also pay attention to the squares, right, which is the Cancer Capricorn axis. That Saturn Neptune conjunction at 0 Aries is going to hit off 0 Cancer, 0 Capricorn in the chart as well. You might have a bunch of things going on in Cancer, a bunch of things going on in Capricorn. That's going to be important. Or you may have a bunch of midpoints. Very worthy of looking into. Okay, so finally, just with Saturn in Aries, Saturn in Aries is in its place of fall relative to what's called essential dignities and abilities, which is a system that classes or defines planets in their strength and or in their debilitated or weaker position. When a planet is in fall, it is said to be debilitated. But one thing to remember about a planet that is debilitated, because let me just hit you with this, which most people don't think about. The sun in Libra is debilitated, just the sun in Libra. Because why? Because the sun in Aries is exalted. So the opposition, Libra, places the sun in a debilitated position. If something is exalted, the opposite of it is debilitated. So the sun in Libra is debilitated. So what are we going to say then? That everyone born with the sun in Libra has a debilitated sun? We don't think of it like that at all. So one thing to think about when a planet is debilitated in your chart, because many will be born, some with several, some with one planet at least. I've rarely seen a chart where a person has nothing debilitated at all. It can happen, of course, but I don't see it as often. I mostly would see charts that have at least one thing debilitated. And the debilitation implies some sort of weakness or some sort of mismatch between the planet and the sign. So, moon in Scorpio, that's a debilitated moon. Saturn in Leo, that's a debilitated Saturn. Venus in Virgo, that's a debilitated Venus. And there's countless other examples. And although the traditional teachings have shown us that when a planet is debilitated, it's unable to perform in its pure potential or desire because the planet does not match with the sign that it's in. There's a mismatch. And, traditionally the mismatch is said to be some sort of disadvantage. And yes, it will have those things about it that are challenging and difficult. But one thing that I don't think I've ever heard anyone else say, which I read many, many years ago. I studied medieval astrology with Bernadette Brady about 20 years ago. One thing she said, and I've seen this because I've observed it since then, is that when a planet is debilitated, quite apart from the facets that might describe the challenges or the disadvantage and so on and so forth, is it's also important to understand that the way that planet is going to operate is it's going to operate outside the norm. So it's not going to act in a traditional way. It's going to be more of a Uranian, Uranus type of energy, if you like, just to draw the contrast. It's going to act according to its own ways, right? Which go against the status quo, which go against the systems. And at least when one is doing that, they are being authentic to themselves, right? To what feels true and right for them. And of course, the downside, if you like, because of the nature and the construct of this reality, is going to be the consequences. When you rebel against the system and the status quo, there's usually consequences. It depends, there's a million different examples we could give, but I'm just speaking generally, right? And so that's the challenging part with a planet in its detrimental fall, which is debilitated. It's going to act differently, which is great. But if it's doing that in with little awareness, I'll just put it like that, with little awareness, and it's not sort of um, thinking about the surrounding everything, connected to that. And because they're acting in a very, F you kind of way, I'm going to do it my way, and that's all there is to it. Sometimes that's grand and that's wonderful, and that can lead to extraordinary things. And sometimes that can lead to troubled paths as well. It just depends. We've got to assess everything. You can't just make a blanket statement. But I just wanted to let you know that that's what happens with planets that are in detrimental fall. They act in a very unique kind of way outside of the consensus reality. And sometimes that can be fortuitous, but sometimes it can be very challenging. So just keep that in mind as well. Because Saturn is in Aries, which is its fall placement. So that's one aspect of Saturn in Aries, is debilitation business. Um, But on the other hand, we also have all these other things connected to Saturn in Aries. Now, a lot of people might think, oh, Saturn in Aries, is that going to limit my freedom? Is that going to limit my ability to express myself? Is that going to be like a restriction on me? And it would be really normal to ask those questions and to maybe conclude that the answer is yes to all of them. And maybe in some ways it will be like that for certain people, especially if you are living in a complete consensus reality construct, then you are subject to whatever's been shown to you, whatever's been told to you to believe or do or follow. Because when you're hooked into the consensus reality, you're not having a critical mindset. You're just hooked in to whatever's being fed to you, right? So for those that are more non-consensus, and I would define myself as one of those people, and I know many of you watching would as well, then the Saturn in Aries perhaps wouldn't be as debilitating in that way, because people who don't live inside the consensus reality tend to be more, they initiate their own life story and life journey. They initiate their own, um, their own sort of perspectives and thoughts and decisions. They explore things, they don't just sit with one little narrative of what they've been told, this is it, and that's all there is to it. A lot of people do. The consensus reality governs about 85% of the population. So it's pretty fucking huge. Anyway, those that are, yeah, just more connected with uh, having the courage to decide for themselves what's real, what's truth, what's right. Not what's right for him and her and them and they and whoever, but what's right for you. Being really authentically, tuned in, plugged in to that within yourself. So Saturn in Aries, therefore, Aries is all about initiation, right? Impulse, initiation, personal power, courage, initiative, innovators. It's a very, very, very strong sign, Aries. It's very hard to stop Aries. In fact, you can't stop them. Now, Saturn in Aries might kind of feel like some roadblocks. And I want to say that if there's some roadblocks there, again, first of all, let me just say this depends on your age. You might be having your first Saturn return at this time. Um, Depends on your upbringing, your overall experience in life up to this point, on your beliefs, on your personal construct of this reality. Saturn is our construct of reality, how we have constructed the reality that we perceive based on our inner reality. So in Aries, we have an opportunity to give birth to a brand new reality, um, to reconstruct and deconstruct as well, because Saturn constructs and deconstructs. It does both. So Aries is so pure and wild and free, like the wind. It's fire. It purifies. It's so courageous and bold. And the Saturn part of it can really help with bringing some form, right? Perhaps to the um, the new journey, the new chapter in our life, Um, it's bringing discipline and form. Saturn is always fucking awkward. There's no two ways about it, especially in this third dimension reality. You can't cut corners with Saturn because Saturn is a corner. So when it comes to Saturn, we're going to go, okay, I get it. I know what I have to do here. So it's the more we can be in touch with our own inner reality and understand our role in everything, I guess the healthier this Saturn in Aries journey can be of what we are beginning and what we are truly leaving behind. I can remember the last time Saturn was in Aries. For me, I was very young, but I remember it. And I know exactly what was going on in my life then. And I'm thinking about what's going on in my life now. And I'm just reflecting on that because I can see it, quite clearly for me personally. So that's something that you might want to do as well. Again, it depends how old you are. You might be 30, so you wouldn't be able to do that. Because, that means you were born 30 years ago, right? Last time Saturn was in Aries, so that wouldn't work for you. But if you're 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 or 90, you can absolutely do that, right? So we're all at a different process as well, therefore in our journey and evolution, of course. But Saturn in Aries, um, it'll get some slack because it's not the happiest place, right? For sure. But yeah, I just want to remind people that it really does come down to the version of reality that we project ourselves and how in touch we really are, how in tune with we really are. And in the spirit of the Aries energy, which is pure fire, pure light, pure courage, it's just the purest zone, just pure, pure, pure. It's like um, an innocent little baby. That's the Aries energy. It's just full of innocence, right? And excitement and enthusiasm, right? For life. Now, Saturn can come in and, curb that a bit, right? And go, oh, slow down, baby. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing. I'm just simply saying that if you have all these ambitions, and goals and desires of this new chapter that we are all stepping into, which is, I think, what we need to be feeling, at one level, we need to be feeling that, right? But we also need to understand that we've got to work with the laws of Saturn, not the laws that are dictated by the world that's external of us, but creating a new reality within that gets us more in touch actually with natural law. If we followed natural law, the world would look very different. So it's exciting times to say the least. But, Neptune is there and that's a big factor. And the as I said at the very beginning, these two are such an antithesis to one another, and the question, I guess, will be how do we, it's so tricky because Saturn wants to create the form and it will, and Neptune wants to dissolve it and it will. So we have to find a middle something to help us be in touch with both at the healthiest level. The downward level would be to feel Saturn's suffocation and Neptune's complete fucking disillusionment and disappointment. And the healthy level would be to work with Saturn's laws in a more natural way within us and understand the process of time, the importance of discipline and commitment. And the Neptune part would be to bring in, don't give up on your personal dreams, Aries personal Neptune dreams, because of what the world has fucking reflected through their bullshit narrative story for eons. That's why this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries is the hallmark of, generations to come. The matter of decentralization, for example, right? Pluto in Aquarius, we are in the times of the people matter. Your fucking little systems that have navigated for so long and have kept humanity in enslavement for so long, your dynasties and your hierarchies and all your that's all gonna disintegrate. Aries is about our own personal initiative. Pluto in Aquarius is about the people. So it's actually, it's so phenomenal what's happening. So phenomenal. Anyway, having said all of that, I'm going to sign off and I'm going to see you soon with much more. Hope that was helpful and interesting. Love to hear your comments, questions if you have them, and reach out if you'd like to spend some time with me and look at your chart in whatever way you wish to look at it. See you all soon. Much love.